Welcome to another episode of Unlock Your Child's Full Potential podcast, where we're all about creating lasting connections with our children. I'm your host, Billy, and today we're diving into an incredibly insightful conversation with Kelley Coleman, the author of the newly released book, Everything No One Tells You About Parenting a Disabled Child. This book is packed with valuable resources compiled from Kelley's own experiences and the wisdom of over 40 experts, many of whom are disabled themselves. The book aims to help parents spend less time navigating challenges and more time simply loving their kids just as they are. In this interview, we explore questions like, what's the most crucial advice for parents after their child receives a diagnosis? What are the best places to look for information and support? What is like parenting one kid who is disabled and one kid who's not? And are we even supposed to use the word disabled? What can families who don't have a disabled child take away from this story? How do we teach our children to be more inclusive and how to act around a kid or adult who is visibly disabled? And how to give them the language and understanding that disability is just part of life. Kelley's heartfelt and candid responses offer invaluable insights for all parents, whether they're navigating similar paths or simply looking to understand and support those who are. This episode is filled with practical advice, emotional honesty, and a powerful message about inclusion and love. So please share it with a friend who might need to hear it. Let's dive in. Welcome, Kelley. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Thank you so much for having me and for having this space that just feels so grounding and peaceful and relatable in all of the different conversations. It's really great that every conversation of yours I've listened to just feels like there's so much that is universal for all of us within that. And that's just so exciting.
I'm truly honored to hear that. I know your book recently came out, Everything No One Tells You About Parenting a Disabled Child. And it's a collection of resources that can take parents years to find out on their own. And I know the book is a result of your own experience having a child with multiple disabilities. Would you like to tell us a bit about your story and how it became your purpose to help parents in that situation?
Absolutely. So funny how we think we're on one path and life is just like, no, cool, we're going to go on a different path. And this is certainly not the path I ever envisioned for myself. I was joking with another mom this morning that there's absolutely no one that when they're pregnant, they're saying like, oh, I wonder what kind of feeding tube my child will have. Like, no, that's just not on our radar. And when that became not only on my radar, but part of all of the things that we need to do to support one of my kids to even keep him alive, much less thriving as he is, it shifts everything. I have two amazing boys. They're 12 and 10, and they are the best of friends, and they are quirky and weird and wonderful in all their own great ways. Our 10-year-old, as you mentioned, has multiple disabilities, and we started down the road of discovery of that from when he was an infant. And he has, within his many diagnoses, a yet undiagnosed genetic syndrome. He has cerebral palsy, epilepsy, autism, microcephaly, cortical vision impairment, feeding tube, sensory processing, fine motor, gross motor, cognitive, behavioral, medical needs. Like, he's just like, I'm going to check all the boxes because I'm an overachiever. And within all of that, he is this vibrant, happy, healthy human who is not a child I was expecting to parent, largely because nobody seems to talk about disability until it is us or it is our child, and then it is our entire world. And I'm so passionate about supporting caregivers in taking away the stigma, the shock, the bias, the ableism, as well as this relentless overwhelm, because when our kids' support needs are exponential, the job becomes exponential. And it's not just parenting, it is caregiving, which is a job in and of itself, in addition to parenting. And when we can actually tackle caregiving as a job, it gives us the space within our time, our mental, emotional space to go back to being parents and to just enjoy the experience of parenting our kids for the exact people who they are, and not needing to feel like we need to be their therapists all the time, to do more and check more boxes and do more paperwork, but to actually put the caregiving piece on hold, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for days or weeks at a time, to just be a person who enjoys our kids.
What's the most crucial advice for a parent after their child receives a diagnosis? Like it hits you, then what?
Yes, it does hit you. And almost all of us, when we are handed a diagnosis for our kids, it is done in a way that is not awesome, that does not give us a path forward, and that is often delivered with pity. And I'm so sorry, and this is so hard. And so we're entering into it from a headspace of everyone, including our medical professionals, educators, social workers, telling us what a tragedy this is and no path forward. And basically, we're all just told, like, go home, Google, and cry. Good luck. So, of course, we are feeling all the things and the roller coaster because we don't feel like we have a path forward and we have no idea what we're doing. And so, number one, parents who are entering into this, I start with, like, however you are feeling right now and all the things, yes, that you are right on track. That is how we all feel. You are not alone in this. You should not shame yourself for feeling like you are just falling into this bottomless pit and you don't know what to do, because that's what happens to all of us. So, number one, just validate where you are, acknowledge where you are. Do not shame yourself for whatever thoughts are going through your head, because so many of us are unlearning years of being told even the word disability is like bad. We can't say that. We have to say our kids are quote unquote special. Like, what? No, like, disability is the word that is used in law. It is the word that is chosen by actual disabled people and the disability community. And it's not inherently positive or negative. It's information about who our children are. And we are unlearning and relearning so much, and all of a sudden confronted with our own bias that we didn't even know was there, myself included. And start from wherever you are, connect with other parents in this situation, and get information about disability from disabled people. That shouldn't be revolutionary, but somehow it is. And I realized way too late, my son is 10, after doing this for years, that I was getting all of my information about disability from people who aren't disabled. So, of course, there's all kinds of wrong or biased or just made up information about a lot of it that seems scary. Talking about disability with disabled people is actually not scary and is such a relief, because it is not saying like, oh, isn't this great and it's awesome and seizures are the best. Like, no, in our house seizures are not the best. But it's acknowledging the fullness of the whole experience. There is beauty, there is struggle, there are all of the things. And so many of us parents are bombarded with either, oh, this is such a blessing, this is going to be great. And then we feel shamed because we feel like this is not great. It's hard to still be diapering my 10-year-old. That's not easy. Or we're hit with, this is so tragic, I don't know how you're going to do this. And you're like, are you kidding me? My kid's awesome. And why are you telling me this narrative that just does not ring true? So when we're able to be in community with disabled people, even as simple as following leaders and influencers and experts online, following groups and organizations that serve and that are run by people with disabilities, we can get firsthand information that erases so much of the fear and allows us to start from a place of lived experience and learning from people with lived experience, which makes it easier on everyone, especially for our kids.
Oh, I love that. And your book is doing exactly that, showing people the path forward, right?
Yes,
Making it
thank you.
easier.
Yeah, we all need that path forward. Every chapter in my book has interviews with experts. There are over 40 experts featured in my book, many of whom are disabled themselves and who are leaders in their fields and communities and parents and like all of the things. And as I was writing the book, I knew from the start that the book would fail if it was boring. And if it wasn't something that felt like, oh, okay, cool, this is digestible, and I can not just read this, but remember it and actually use it. So the book reads like a conversation because we need to feel like we can trust our experts, but also ourselves in building this journey that is specific to our family, to our child, to what we have the capacity to do right now. There's no one way to do this, but there is an element of educating ourselves in a way that we can all access and understand and use so that we can build the journey that works for us.
Yeah, and gain the confidence that we are going to be the best parent to this child and really support
Yes.
them.
Yes, and I'm just going to highlight exactly what you just said. With any parenting experience with any kid, there's an amount of not knowing what we're doing because every baby, toddler, child, teenager, human is different. And in any parenting experience, we don't know exactly what we're doing. Even parenting experts don't know exactly what they're doing because
True.
here's this new human. And know that the confidence comes from exactly what you just said of you are the best parent for this child. At every turn, we do the best with the information we have. We learn new information and then we do better. It doesn't mean we beat ourselves up over what we did before or what we didn't do. It means we allow ourselves to learn and grow as we're learning, as our kids are teaching us. And man, I wish I'd sought out the expertise of disabled adults at the very beginning of my journey, because that would have made this so much easier.
So not parents of disabled children, but disabled adults to see their perspective.
Both. Absolutely. One of my experts is a mom of a child who's now an adult who is disabled. Her name's Judy Mark. She started a great organization called Disability Voices United that is run by and serves people with disabilities. And she said, and this is in the book, which I love, that in the early years, she got her best information from other parents of children with disabilities. And as she has gotten older, her family's gotten older, she has gotten her best information from adults with disabilities. And so I think it is a combination where we all need each other. And when we can all serve each other, share information, so that we're not just reinventing the same wheels, which is what most of us are doing.
Yeah, and focus more on the relationship with these kids. Because you said
Yes.
your son is thriving. How do you keep his spirits high?
I love that question because the how do I keep his spirits high is actually the easiest question I've ever been asked, because that's actually not my job. He does that for the rest of the family. Each human is very different. It makes my life a lot easier that he happens to be a human, and this is not anything necessarily to do with his disability. This is just his personality. He wakes up in the morning and we walk into his room and he sits up and starts clapping and is beaming and smiling. And it's hard sometimes. For sure it is hard. And especially with the medical stuff and the dealing with the insurance companies and the schools and the financial planning. For us, he's a kid who moves through life where this is his world and he is just welcoming us all into it. So that makes it easy. And it also makes me really reflect on how we are all entering into this world. For many people, that's not our default. When disabilities are added into the picture, there are many ways that people are not comfortable in the world, physically, emotionally, or otherwise. And, we've dealt, for example, with a lot of sensory processing challenges. And for us, and when those show up for our son, being really in tune with who he is and the accommodations he needs in order to be fully included in the community, in activities, in order to fully participate, it's really being in tune with what he needs to be successful. And sometimes that is as easy as bringing a backpack full of medical supplies and toys that he likes and the service dog. And it is a lot of stuff. I don't need to do all of that for my other child who does not have disabilities, who is remarkably self-sufficient for a 12-year-old. It is a constant project where we start from following his lead so that I'm not just making it up as I go along, but I'm looking to him and saying, what can I learn from him about what he needs? Because that makes my job so much easier. And anything I can do to make my job easier, like sign me up, I'm in.
I love that. I love that. And you mentioned that your sons have a great relationship. I'm wondering if your attention is mostly focused on the boy with disabilities. How do you strike that balance and foster their relationship?
The word balance is such a tricky thing, and it's so complex for families where there are high support needs, like in ours, like with our son, and with his disabilities. Balance doesn't mean 50-50 of all time and energy. Balance means looking at who needs what and when, and not totally ignoring the other one in the process. When our younger son, Aaron, is having medical emergencies, yep, we are all focused on him. And we've learned within that, our older son, Sean, if we give him a job of be sure my phone is charged, grab my phone, we're calling 911, grab my bag, we're going to the hospital, involving him, he's a kid who is at his best when he feels like he has some agency in the situation. Those are the extreme examples. And then there are also the day-to-day examples. Aaron needs one-to-one adult support all the time for his safety, even just moving through the house. So it's not a 50-50 balance of attention, and it is a combination of checking in with our older son, validating however he is feeling, having the one-on-one time with him, which especially I'm very fortunate to have my husband as a very involved and active partner, which makes it easier. For single parents, it can be really hard figuring out, is there support you can access to get that one-on-one time? And also really considering what are activities that we can all do together as a family, that the boys can do together and have their thing together. Going to Disneyland together as a family isn't an option right now because of where my son's sensory support needs are and many other factors. That's not fun for him. Disneyland's fun for me, but not for him. So going to the park where there are a lot of airplanes and watching airplanes together is a family activity that works for us. And really looking at it not mattering what the thing is specifically, our kids just want the time where they feel seen, they feel included. They are not obligated to take care of one another or do tasks for one another or feel a certain way, that we all just get to show up. And if somebody wants to eat 12 ice cream sandwiches, that's usually me, cool, do that. If someone just wants to like applaud for every garbage truck, that's one of my kids, cool, do that. And just creating those spaces where we can be together and all just show up exactly as we are and how we're feeling.
I love that. It sounds like you found the key, at
Thank you. You
least.
know what? I think, have I found the key for today? Sure. Could it all fall apart tonight? Because it often does. Yes, 100%. And I love talking to people who were like, oh, okay, cool. So you've like made a plan and this is good. And the plan is always changing. The rug is always getting pulled out from under us. And having a sense of what we can control, what we can't, what we can anticipate, and knowing that for any of us, however well or terribly we are doing today, that's not a destination and that will change, takes a lot of stress and anxiety out of all of this. I will, for the rest of my life, be a full-time caregiver for one of my children. And his medical needs might escalate at any moment, so that I always need to be able to have a job, a life, everything where I can step out of a job, for example, immediately, walk away for an indeterminate amount of time, maybe an hour, maybe months on end, which I've had to do for his medical needs. It is scary. It is overwhelming. It is exhausting. I go through long periods with not a lot of sleep. And again, back to the families, however you are feeling right now, yep, validate that. We all feel that way.
Yet to keep your positive outlook and your high energy is truly inspiring. Is that your natural character, or is that something you learned through the journey? And that's the ingredient that's making the caregiving experience more manageable.
I love that you're asking questions that no one asks. This is great. And my default is that I am an optimist, and I will figure it out. I will see the positives, and I am such a realist, and it is so hard for me to sometimes even have a conversation with someone who is so positive about, oh my gosh, this is wonderful, and isn't this the best? And I'm like cleaning vomit out of my hair, and like the seizure meds were wrong. And I'm like, actually, no, this is not always the best. And so much of what allows me to remain positive and stay afloat within this is acknowledging the full range of experience and emotions. And if we just bury down the hard stuff and pretend like it's not hard, we're not serving ourselves, and we're also not serving our kids, because it's going to bubble over at some point. And if I'm able to acknowledge, like dealing with the pharmacy or the hours of insurance phone calls, like, hey, kids, this is the reason I'm grouchy today. And it's not you, and you're awesome, also builds into my kids the reality of sometimes we got to do stuff that's no fun. And that's not on my shoulders. That's just part of life. And especially when you have a child who is disabled, I've talked to so many leaders who are working at such high levels in their fields who are disabled, and who have said, even today, even with all my accomplishments and leading an organization, that internalized ableism is still showing up, and I'm still feeling self-conscious about these things as an adult. And knowing that as we are raising our children and raising them to acknowledge the fullness of the experience of who they are, and to also not be ashamed or apologetic for who they are and how they were born, but to lean into that as I am not a disabled person. I do my best to be an ally to the community, certainly in service of my kid, but to really identify him and to encourage him to find his identity as part of that greater community. I can't give him that. I can't say, oh, when I was in fourth grade and disabled, nope, I got nothing.
How can you
So,
support him that way? Listen to podcasts of people who have been through the experience. How do you give him that if he's not
yes,
having friends around him? I don't know. What's your dynamic at home?
yes. And again, so important. I think so many of us are so busy being great parents that it's easy to forget about that piece when we are in a different demographic than our kids. We have 4 humans plus a service dog in our house, and 3 of those humans are not disabled, and 1 of them is. So for us, it was very important for our son, Aaron, to be in a school program and school environment from early education and preschool, and he's now in elementary school, where he is in community, not just with non-disabled peers, but also with other kids and peers and friends who have disabilities. No, it is important for him to see others with disabilities so that he knows he's not the weird kid. We're our family, we're all super weird in our own ways, but disability isn't the weird. Like playing the tuba and doing magic, like that's weird, but it's awesome. Being in community with other kids who are disabled as well as who are not disabled. And for me as a parent, recognizing that we all know disabled people, 1 out of 4 adults in the US has a disability. Many of those are not visible, which means we wouldn't necessarily know someone is disabled by seeing them, by talking to them, by working with them. But starting with knowing that, and the simple act, like you said, of listening to podcasts, of following disabled influencers, creators, leaders on social media, following organizations serving and run by individuals with disabilities, joining organizations, showing up for events. I actually asked one of my experts in this book, she was saying she is herself an adult who is disabled. She has 3 children, 2 of whom are also disabled, and said the number one thing parents can do is to be friends with real life disabled people. And I said, cool, yes. How creepy is it if I go up to people and are like, you're disabled, can we be friends? And she's like, yes, that's super creepy, don't do that. And I said, okay, then what? And she said, that reminder that we already know people with disabilities, they're not obligated to reveal their disabilities to us, but becoming part of these communities and these organizations, showing up for education events or social events or fundraising, whatever it is they have, and being involved, these will become the friends that are in our circles. These will be the people whose social media feeds are showing up over and over, so that we are educating ourselves and our children that also the disabled individuals in our lives aren't just there so we can learn a lesson from them and be done, but so we can just hang out, and mom's going out to dinner with her friend tonight. Her friend happens to be disabled. You know what? Like, we're just friends. That has nothing to do with her.
That's part of life.
It's part, exactly. And statistically, disability is so much more common than most people realize. And when it becomes just part of life, it becomes not so scary for ourselves, for our children, and we're able to radically share information, whether it's about advocacy or the insurance company or the financial plan or like whatever the thing is that moves it forward and makes it all doable.
Yeah. And as a mother who's navigating the challenges of caring for a child with a disability, what do you wish other parents understood, like the parents who don't have a child with a disability? How can they offer a better support and also teach their kids to be more inclusive?
We all need to think about this. And I say this as a mom of a kid with a disability, also as someone who used to be a mom who did not have disability. My younger son is disabled, so I didn't just wake up and like, cool, this is my world and I got this all figured out. We all get it that most people are not coming into this from a place of firsthand experience. I wish that all parents would talk about and acknowledge disability as just information and just a fact. If your kid sees my kid using his feeding tube for lunch out at the park, and your kid is staring, you know what? Your kid's going to stare because most people have never seen a feeding tube before. I had never heard of one until my kid was hospitalized and I was told we were being put on the surgery schedule for a feeding tube. And I was like, what even is that? We get that that's new. Instead of perpetuating this, like, pretend you don't see it, stop staring, look away. Like, we don't see the disability. Nope, like, you see it, it's cool, feeding tubes right there. Be curious about other humans, about all other humans. We can give our kids the language, even if we're not certain ourselves. Again, feeding tube is a great example. If you see me administering lunch to my kid through a feeding tube, and your kid is staring, to say, oh, I haven't seen that before. How cool is that?
Mm-hmm.
And then your kid has that language of, oh, that is cool. And you can say, I'm curious. What do you think that is? Oh, it's going into his stomach. I bet that's food. You can gauge any situation if you take 2 seconds to think. Is it an appropriate moment to go over there? Again, nobody's obligated to share information of their disability with anyone. And if you approach someone and be like, hey, what's wrong with your kid? Then I'll just be like, nothing, bye.
Mm-hmm.
And we're done. Like, that's never okay. You don't want that. But if somebody came up to you and said, hey, that's cool, I'm curious about that. Are you comfortable sharing what that is? Yeah, absolutely we are. I have a kid who is very outgoing and social and comfortable sharing and engaging and being a part of these conversations. So we do share and educate, teaching our kids to be curious. There is increasing representation in the media of disability. If we are watching Sesame Street and we see Julia the Muppet who is autistic, we don't have to say, oh, that poor Muppet. No, we can say, oh, she has autism. Do you know what that is? Let's learn about that. Oh, there are a lot of kids who are autistic. I bet there are kids at your school you might not recognize when you see it because they're not a Muppet. Wouldn't it be cool if they were, though? I wish we had more Muppets going to our kids' schools. Being curious and taking those moments to teach our kids gives them the language to be inclusive and accepting, and exactly what you're saying, to understand this is just a part of life. So when they see another kid or an adult with a visible disability, when someone's disability is presenting that might not be immediately visible, instead of the reaction of like, oh, this is different, difference weird, difference bad, the kid will think, oh, we talked about that. All right, cool. I'm going to go like eat a sandwich.
I
All
was always wondering, because I'm still figuring it out for myself, how would the
Yeah.
person who has a disability feel if we're looking at them and talking about them? Wouldn't they be self-conscious or just being uninterested, even worse? Like, I cannot imagine what's on the other side.
It depends on the context. If somebody's like standing next to us, talking about us, but not engaging with us, like that's super weird. But engaging with the people, engaging in the moment, if your kid sees someone with a wheelchair or another mobility aid that they've never seen before, maybe you just acknowledge out loud with your kid, like, oh, that person goes to the grocery store using a wheelchair, you go to a grocery store using your feet to walk, and that's how we do it. All right, we're all doing a thing. It can be as simple as acknowledging it and finding the common ground. And if the person overhears that, they would appreciate that you are not saying that person's a superhero because they left the house being disabled. Because, yeah, you're also not hearing, oh, that poor woman, she has to use a wheelchair to go grocery shopping. Like, no, actually, wheelchair is her source of independence and mobility, so not poor woman. If we're coming from a place of information and curiosity and showing our kids the common ground, oh, yes, that kid does have a service dog at the mall. He needs that for the support. You don't need that? All right, cool. Let's go buy some new shoes. And if your kid is engaging in the bigger conversation, there might be moments when you can engage or ask questions. Not everybody's going to want to. Don't make them feel like a jerk if they're like, yeah, I don't have the time for this. Like, cool, thanks. And not like, what do you mean? Because I've seen that. And it's like, they're being a person in the world just like you. They don't have to educate you. But if you or your child genuinely wants to engage, if you've made eye contact and smiled, if it is an appropriate moment, it's always good to say, hey, my kid's curious about your wheelchair because it's super cool that he has not seen this before and is curious how people who are different than him live and do life and do all the things. And are you comfortable if he asks you a question? Do you have a moment? And if not, cool. People ask questions all the time of us, and my son and the service dog get so many questions. And the reality is, when it's coming from kids, especially, many people are enthusiastic to educate, to engage. And that can also be a conversation that you bring up in the car or at home, even saying, hey, I was thinking how cool it is that someone who isn't able to walk has a wheelchair that allows them total independence. And did you see how her van was modified and had this thing and it was mechanized and it moved? And like, there are people who invented that, and good job, science. And talking about everything not as, oh, this poor person, or oh, that's inspiring, but like, oh, I noticed this, and everybody lives their life differently. And how cool is that, that we can all be included in whatever form that takes?
Searching for the common ground.
Mhm.
That's the most important thing. And I'm wondering, can we purposefully create opportunities for children to interact positively with one another? Like my child who doesn't have a disability with a child who does. Do you think this could be a good way to make it more part of life?
Yes. Oh my goodness. And that is the reality, that sometimes our kids aren't seeing others with visible disabilities out in the world. Many places have inclusive or accessible playgrounds. Go to the accessible playground. And even if it's noticing that there are ramps throughout the playground and there are no wood chips because you couldn't get mobility devices across those darn wood chips, even noticing and going to events. There is a walk event for the Epilepsy Foundation, for the Rare Disease Foundation. Going to these events where you are just being in community with other people. And also at our schools, my great hope is that there will be a special education program everywhere that fits all the kids. That's not always the case. But whenever there is, giving our kids the language and the curiosity. So especially at school and when they're independent of us, that they're coming in with curiosity about other humans so that they can create these real and meaningful friendships and interactions on their own. And the reality is, we are constantly in community with people who are not like us. I'm guessing people notice that you have an accent, and that's different than how I move through life. People are different races, religions, presentations, abilities, all the things all the time. And acknowledging all of the differences within humans rather than pretending like we don't see them allows our kids to just have a basis for being inclusive of everyone. And I didn't have that growing up. I grew up in a very small town, homogenous, not like where I am now. And man, it would have been nice to have been exposed to all of the diversity of humans.
Yeah, that's a great message. Just being exposed, being curious, and having the language to just talk about it. This was just wonderful. I loved talking to you, and you are a true inspiration.
Thank
And
you.
before we wrap up, would you like to remind people where they can order the book and connect with you and just learn more about what you're up to?
Yes, thank you. So my book is Everything No One Tells You About Parenting a Disabled Child, Your Guide to the Essential Systems, Services, and Supports. It is how to actually do the stuff, which sounds boring, but it's actually really fun. And the book is available at all the book places, Amazon, Target, Barnes and Noble, your local bookseller. And my website is kelleycoleman.com. That's Kelley Coleman.com. And come visit me. Lots of events and stuff soon to be posted. And thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of your community. I appreciate all that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Kelley. Thanks for tuning in and letting me be a part of your day. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated on our latest episodes. And if you found today's conversation on parenting a disabled child to be interesting and valuable, please share it with a friend who might benefit from hearing it. Your support means the world.